All right, everybody, thanks for joining us for the special session meeting of City Council of the City of Jersey Village on Monday, March 21st, 7 p.m. We move into item A, call to order, call meeting to order, announce a quorum is present. Madam Secretary, quorum is present.
Yes, and it's March 29.
March 29th.
For the record.
Move into item B, citizen comments. Any person who desires to address City Council regarding an item on the agenda will be heard at this time in compliance with Texas Open Meetings Act. Unless the subject matter of the comment is on the agenda, the city staff and city council members are not allowed to discuss the subject. Each person is limited to 5 minutes for comments to the city council. One person signed up to speak tonight. That's Mr. Mark Malloy. Go ahead,
Can you
Mark.
hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Mark Malloy, 7803 Hamilton Circle, past city council member of the city of Jersey Village, Texas. Citizens comments for the 03/29/2021 special session city council meeting to and accept the 2020 comprehensive annual financial report and the 2020 single audit report. I'm speaking and asking questions about the 2020 comprehensive annual financial report. The Jersey Village government, I believe, are trying to lessen the actual municipal golf course operation losses in the way expenses are posted on the financial statement. From the information presented in the comprehensive annual financial report, it is showing that the golf course is actually showing a operating loss of $283,425 before transfers of $169,937 of city revenue into the golf course fund. The city government is saying the actual operating loss should be reduced to show that the golf course actually should only show an operating loss of $113,488. The money given to the golf course that is not being brought in from its daily operations should not reduce its operating loss. The principal, interest, and debt service expenses for the original purchase of the golf course by the city are not counted as an expense to the golf course and were paid by the city through the general fund, which for this year ending 09/30/2020 is a total of $514,901. The operating loss amount $283,425, and the debt service payments for the year of $514,901, plus the money given to the golf course by the city government of $169,937, should actually show the golf course operating losses to be $968,263. And this is not counting other sources of money given to the golf course by the Jersey Village government, such as money given to the golf course from the Capital Improvement Fund. The comprehensive annual financial report is also showing that the city has outstanding long-term total primary government debt as of the report to be $10,340,871. The Jersey Village government is taking money from the citizens to subsidize the municipal golf course's inability to fund itself through its business operations. The Jersey Village government is now asking the citizens, taxpayers of Jersey Village to give even more of their hard-earned, hard-to-get money that they need to pay their personal living expenses to the Jersey Village government to spend on non-needed Jersey Village government desires. The Jersey Village government is asking the Jersey Village citizens, taxpayers, to vote during this May's general election to hand over, if already enacted, an additional, as of this year, estimated $2 million from the half-cent sales tax for property tax relief fund that was enacted in the year 1995 to give the Jersey Village taxpayers some property tax reduction relief. The Jersey Village government is saying they need more of the taxpayers' money, and they're using the guise of funding the fire department when in all actuality, they want to free up the general fund money that is specifically allocated for the citizens' taxpayer property tax relief fund to spend on their new $8 million city hall or their $2,770,000 golf course clubhouse, or their village center desired dream development, or their $800,000 supplemental golf course treated wastewater irrigation project. The Jersey Village citizens, taxpayers need to vote no on the May election ballot dealing with the Jersey Village government asking to abolish the sales tax for property tax relief fund and to say we want to keep our sales tax for property tax relief fund and tell the Jersey Village government that their never-ending need for more taxpayer money spigot is being turned off. So that's basically what I had to say for tonight. Thank you.
We'll move into item C, consider resolution number 2021-20, reviewing and accepting the 2020 comprehensive annual fiscal financial report, CAFR, and the 2020 single audit reports. Isabel?
Hi, good evening. Yes, Mayor. Robert Bell from the Harvard Peshasik. He will be conducting the presentation for the CAFR and the single audit. So he should be connecting with us.
Yes, sir.
Hey, I'm here, Isabel. Good
Hi.
evening. Good
Hi,
evening.
Robert.
Good evening. Well, it's an honor to be here this evening. First of all, this has been a really tough year for everybody, as you know. And when we think about the first responders having it the worst of everyone, and they certainly do, I want to recognize also what goes on behind the scene in the administrative staff and the management of the city in taking care of all the compliance with laws and regulations that has to be kept up with. It's really easy to let that stuff slide during an emergency crisis like what we've had. And so I thought that management administration did a great job of making sure that the consistency that the city has gone to expect that has stayed throughout this entire event, and that was our finding. So again, I want to give it just a hats off to management and Isabel and her staff before we even get into the report. Over on page 17 is our independent auditor's report. Very pleased to announce it's an unmodified opinion, which is the highest level of assurance we can give the city as your independent auditors, that all the disclosures required by generally accepted accounting principles have been included into the financial statements are presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles as set forth by the Government Accounting Standards Board. So your financial statements are exactly as they need to be presented, just like all other governments are throughout the United States. We're using the same benchmark that we're using for everybody else. Our firm audits about 150 governmental entities across the state of Texas. This is all we do. We audit about 40 different cities. And so your financial statements are presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. Over on page 42 and 43 is the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. If you were only going to look at 2 pages in this entire document, this is the first page I would direct your attention to. This gives an overall view of what took place for the city for your governmental funds for the year. Your general fund came in, had a net reduction in fund balance of $487,000 for the year, which, and again, in light of everything that took place for the year, that's not a bad reduction to have. Giving you an ending fund balance of $7,729,000 in comparison to total expenditures of approximately $14 million. As you know, financial advisors look to your fund balance as your primary indicator of financial health with the governmental entity. They're looking you to have a minimum of about 60 days of operating on hand. In the cities is about at 6 months. And so you're in great shape from a fund balance perspective in your general fund. Over on page 49 is the results of operations through your proprietary fund types. And about midway through the page, we present the operating loss of both the water and sewer fund and the golf course fund. And then towards the bottom of the page, we also correctly show all the investment earnings, the interest expense, as well as transfers in and out of those particular funds for the year. Just one other item to point to, just a little bit of good news. Back on page 82 is the presentation of the results of the Texas Municipal Retirement System, Texas TMRS Fund. And last year, the net pension liability was approximately $4.5 million. Very pleased to announce that liability has dropped down to about $2.9 million. And so that's an excellent reduction to have. There is another report presented here. It's called the single audit report. Well, it's not showing up very well there, but it's the single audit report. And that's over your federal grant funds of all your buyouts you had this year. Anytime a government receives over $750,000, we're required to conduct what we call a single audit. That's in accordance with the government auditing standards. And all of those came out as being a standard report. There were no findings associated with that grant work. That concludes my remarks on their financial statements. More than happy to entertain any questions council may have.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Opening up the questions for council to ask.
Robert, you heard Mr. Malloy express some concerns regarding how the interest on bonds for purchase of the golf course were being accounted for. Can you address how that is handled according to Governmental Accounting Standard Board practices?
Absolutely. The city with underneath government accounting standards, the city has some options to how you want to present information. And again, it's based upon what the intent is on how those bonds are going to be repaid. And so that drives how they're recorded initially. And so I think it was early on, I think even before my coming on the scene, that it was the intent for that to be covered with governmental resources. And so that's the way it's reflected in the financial statements.
So in other words, had we intended to cover it using, excess profits from the golf course, then it would have been accounted for in the enterprise fund. But because we knew going in that we would likely have to cover the cost of those bonds using general funds, then that's why it's accounted for within the general fund as opposed to the golf course fund.
Correct. And that's the way it's always been presented.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Comments? All right. Thank you very much. This is, must be the 6th year that I've participated in a CAFR, and every single year the city's net position is very strong, and it's something that traditionally the city councils before me, even when I was a kid here, the tradition was to make sure that we have a reserve fund above the minimum standard, and it's definitely something that helps us in this day and age when there seems to be a disaster every year. And unfortunately, we have to plan for that to happen going forward. So hearing that we have about 6 months of reserve fund, and that makes me feel good as a citizen and a taxpayer. So thank you so much for the report. Is there any other questions or comments?
The only other thing I would say, I did want to piggyback off of that a little bit, because sure. I think something that's important to point out is, and Robert, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you're looking at that reserve, that 6-month reserve is only counting funds that are in the general fund, correct?
Right.
So there are projects we have that are slated to happen at some point in the near future, for which we have funds in our capital improvement fund, which is separate from the general fund. So when you're talking 6 months, that's with funding that's not even earmarked for some project. So I think it's important for people to understand that even when you take into account some of the things we've planned for, we still have 6 months of reserves in situations where typically I think a 90-day reserve is generally considered the golden standard. So I think that just speaks highly to the fact that even though people may have some concerns about some of the expenditures that are happening, it is not being done in any way that threatens the financial health of the city. We are still being, I think by most standards, extraordinarily conservative with our balances.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think it leaves you guys going forward, I'm term limited in May, as is Greg, but going forward, it's going to be nice for you guys to have that conversation during the budget process to see if there's some tax relief that can happen, some things that can happen with the homestead exemption, and that's a great conversation to have. But this is the first step, is to see, hey, what's the financial health of the city? And it's right now, it's as it's been since for as long as I can remember, it's very, very good. Greg, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, Robert, the past year has been tough on a lot of municipalities and a lot of government entities. How has Jersey Village fared relative to the other entities that you've audited?
It's done relatively well. It's been really, I think going into this crisis, it didn't turn out as bad as it could have been. I think there was a number of kind of surprises along the way, that sales tax ended up being stronger than what we typically expected it to be. Even in cases of hotel motel taxes, at times when I thought the number would have been 0, it wasn't 0. And so I think that in light of everything, to have in your general fund, you had a reduction of approximately $500,000. When you think about a rainy day, my gosh, this was a rainy day and we only reduced our fund balance by $500,000. That's pretty extraordinary.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. Anybody have any other comments? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion on the resolution.
I move to approve resolution 2021-20.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any more discussion on the topic? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Mayor, who was that second by?
Gary Wilbenhorst.
Thank you.